Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are really taking a sledgehammer to what most people think of as modern network security.
Yeah, and if you feel like you're constantly playing defense online, always, reacting to the latest breach, well, you're not wrong.
That feeling is spot on, isn't it? Because we're essentially trying to secure like a hyper-connected modern world using rules and architecture from the 70s.
Pretty much. It was designed for openness, for sharing, I think academic papers, maybe some early cat photos, I don't know. It definitely wasn't intended to guard, multi-trillion-dollar global economies.
And that's the heart of it, the core idea we're digging into today. The internet's foundation is trust, openness. And trying to bolt security onto that after the fact, well, it's created a system that's just fundamentally broken.
We've layered on firewalls, encryption, all sorts of complex things.
Right, defenses on top of defenses.
But the basic flaw, it's still right there at the bottom layer.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to uncover what our sources are calling the binary mistake.
The binary mistake. The thing apparently at the root of pretty much all major security failures. And then look at the alternative. Digital identification or digital ID.
And the stakes are huge. The cost of sticking with this broken system, it's getting astronomical. We're talking over $24.8 trillion in cybercrime losses in the last 5 years alone.
24.8 trillion.
Yeah. And the projections, they suggest that figure is likely to double in the next 5 years. This isn't just annoying anymore. It's potentially catastrophic on a systemic level.
Wow. Okay, so to really get our heads around this fundamental error, maybe think about building, say, a skyscraper. You wouldn't build a 100-story tower on foundations meant for, I don't know, a garden shed, right?
Right, makes sense.
You could try adding supports, maybe use the strongest steel beams ever made, but if the actual ground underneath is quicksand, the whole thing's unstable.
And that quicksand, in our analogy, is what the tech world calls indirect interaction.
Let's trace that back.
Yeah.
The early internet, it didn't need Fort Knox level security. It was a small group built on trust.
Exactly. That decision back then, prioritizing easy access and openness over robust security, that's the sort of original sin, the foundational flaw we're wrestling with today.
And it's fascinating how that initial design choice, that need for openness, directly led to this core technical vulnerability.
Yeah.
The dependence on public access models.
Right, which then forces us into using indirect interaction.
Okay, let's pause there. Define that for us. Indirect interaction, what's actually happening when I log in somewhere, and why is it inherently risky?
So indirect interaction just means you, the user, aren't connecting directly to the system you want to access. You're going through something else first.
Like my web browser. Or an app.
Precisely.
Yeah.
A browser, an app, some piece of software installed on your machine. That intermediary takes your credentials, usually, a password or maybe a security token,
Okay.
and it transmits that data over the network. And those network channels, they can be insecure, they can be monitored, they could be compromised.
And this is where the binary mistake you mentioned comes in.
This is exactly it, because computer science, at its core, is binary. It's yes or no, 0 or 1, true or false. There's no maybe.
Right, definite states.
But when that transmitted data, like your password, arrives at the network server, the server can't be 100% absolutely certain in a truly binary way that the data is legitimate and that it came from the actual user it claims to be.
So it has to. Guess.
It has to assume. It assumes the data is trustworthy based on, protocols and encryption, but it's still an assumption about indirectly received information. And that need to assume to trust transmitted data fundamentally clashes with pure binary logic, which demands absolute verification.
Hold on, let me just process that. Are you saying every single time I log into my bank or my email or anything secure, the network is basically making an educated guess about me?
In a fundamental sense, yes. It's making judgment based on probabilities, on patterns, on the data it receives indirectly, but it's not making a hard binary verification of your actual physical presence or your immediate intent right at that moment. And that inherent ambiguity, that lack of binary certainty, that's the crack that hackers exploit every single time.
Because the system has to trust that incoming data stream, at least provisionally.
Exactly. And relying on that assumed trust opens the floodgates to, well, the whole catalog of common attacks. Phishing works because you're tricking the user into sending their data indirectly through a fake intermediary.
Right.
Man-in-the-middle attacks work by intercepting or altering that data while it's in transit. Brute force attacks, credential stuffing. They all hammer away at systems that are designed to accept and evaluate indirectly transmitted credentials.
It just keeps coming back to that core issue, trusting data sent indirectly. So, okay, if we fully trust the transmission itself, the industry's answer was add more layers, right? Which brings us to multi-factor authentication, MFA.
The supposed silver bullet.
Yeah, everyone talks about MFA. It's the standard advice, the gold standard even, yet you're suggesting it's often not really MFA at all. How is that possible?
Well, the definition of true MFA, the official one, is perfectly sound. It requires verifying identity using factors from two or more distinct, completely separate categories.
And those categories are?
1, something you know, like a password or a PIN. 2, something you have, like a physical key fob, a specific registered device, or, importantly, a digital ID token. And 3, something you are, which is biometrics, fingerprint, face scan, that kind of thing.
Okay, know, have, are. Two different categories needed.
Minimum 2, yes. But here's the problem, the illusion, as you put it. What most organizations have actually rolled out and call MFA. It's often just single-factor authentication, SFA, wearing a disguise.
How so? What's the disguise?
Think about the most common implementation.
Yeah.
You enter your password, that's something you know. Then you get a text message with a one-time code sent to your phone.
Right. Seems like two steps. Something I know, something I have maybe, my phone.
But see, the moment you type that code from the text message into the website or app, it stops being something you have. It just becomes another piece of data, another secret that the network now knows.
Oh, I see. It's just another something you know.
Exactly. Both the password and the SMS code rely entirely on the same underlying weakness. They are both pieces of data transmitted indirectly over a network channel to be verified. Fundamentally, it's the same category, the same mechanism, the same vulnerability.
And this isn't some, like, obscure technicality we just discovered. You mentioned sources pointing this out years ago.
Decades ago, practically.
Hmm.
Our sources highlight a crucial regulatory statement from 2006 by the FFIEC, that's the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, a major U.S. banking regulator.
Okay, what did they say back in '06?
They stated quite explicitly that using multiple solutions from the same category, like a password plus an SMS code, would not constitute multi-factor authentication. It was crystal clear even then.
Yet here we are, almost 20 years later, and that password plus SMS model is probably the most common form of MFA people encounter.
Precisely. And the big consequence of this widespread mislabeling is a deeply dangerous, false sense of security. Organizations and users, too, believe they're secure, they believe they're compliant with regulations because they've ticked the MFA box.
But in reality,
Their core authentication method is still fundamentally vulnerable to any attack that targets that indirect transmission of data. They haven't actually added a truly separate factor of authentication.
okay, so if indirect interaction is the quicksand foundation, and the most common fix, MFA, is often just more quicksand disguised as concrete, we need something totally different.
We need an architectural reset. We need to move away from these complex, layered, but ultimately flawed systems and back towards, well, binary truth.
Which brings us to the solution you mentioned earlier, digital IDs and direct user interaction.
Yes, this represents that paradigm shift. It's the fork in the road that, honestly, the industry kind of ignored early on, mostly because indirect methods seemed more convenient at the time.
Convenience over security, a common theme.
Always. But the core idea here is simple. We need to shift the network's trusted endpoint.
What does that mean, shifting the endpoint, and how does the technology actually get around that fatal flaw of having to trust transmitted data?
Okay, so the digital ID itself isn't just software. It's a unique, cryptographically secured physical token. Think of it like a highly advanced hardware key.
Okay, a physical thing I plug in.
Exactly. And by doing that, we shift the network security perimeter, the endpoint it crusts, away from the vulnerable software, the browser, the app, your operating system, and onto the ID token itself.
Ah, so the network trusts the physical device when it's present.
Precisely. The ID is only live, only part of the network equation, when it's physically connected to the authorized access point.
So the physical presence becomes the verifying factor, not some data sent from it.
You've got it.
Yeah.
We completely bypass the browser, the intermediary software, and all the vulnerabilities associated with those public-facing systems. That is direct interaction. The system grants access based purely on the verified physical presence of that specific authorized ID token. No assumptions, no guessing games about transmitted data.
It sounds much cleaner, much more binary.
It is binary. Either the correct authorized token is physically present and verified, or it's not. Yes or no.
Now, our sources use this interesting term, digital superposition, to describe how the system verifies this. Sounds like something out of quantum physics. Can you break that down?
Yeah, it's an analogy, but a useful one. It borrows from the quantum concept, where something can be in multiple states until observed. Here, though, it's simpler. The system constantly queries the status of the authorized digital ID for a specific function or access point. Is it present or is it absent?
Present or absent? Okay.
The truly revolutionary part here is the ability to cryptographically prove absence. Traditional security wastes enormous resources trying to validate incoming data streams to prove presence.
Right, trying to decide if the login attempt is real.
But with direct interaction, if the specific authorized digital ID is absent from the designated physical or logical gateway, any access attempt using that ID's credentials, no matter how authentic the data might look, is instantly, automatically, and unequivocally rejected.
Because the required physical component isn't there.
Exactly. It becomes a hard, binary rejection based on proven absence.
Wow. Okay, this principle proving absence suddenly makes some recent, pretty terrifying security failures look very different in hindsight. Let's talk about that Oldmar water plant hack in Florida back in 2021.
Oh yeah, that one was chilling. A hacker got remote access to the water treatment plant's control systems.
And tried to poison the water supply.
Tried to drastically increase the levels of sodium hydroxide, lye, to dangerous amounts. The only reason it failed was pure luck. A human operator happened to be watching his monitor, saw the mouse cursor moving on its own, changing the settings, and immediately reversed it.
Pure chance. So how would digital ID have changed that outcome?
If that control system had required direct interaction via the operator-specific digital ID, the moment the system queried and confirmed that the operator's authorized ID was absent because presumably the operator wasn't physically logged into that control console right then, or maybe wasn't connected to the secure remote gateway with their ID.
Then the hacker's commands would have been just blocked.
Instantly blocked. Yeah. Automatically. The system wouldn't have cared how legitimate the commands looked. The authorized physical token wasn't present. No human needing to notice. No luck involved. Binary rejection.
That's a stark difference. And does the same principle apply to bigger, more complex breaches, like, say, the SolarWinds attack? That involved sophisticated infiltration, moving sideways through networks.
Absolutely. A key element in the SolarWinds breach, and many like it, was the attacker's ability to gain initial access and then move laterally, escalating privileges, often using legitimate-looking credentials they had stolen.
Right, they look like valid users once in.
But the underlying vulnerability was the network's inability to verify, with binary certainty, when specific, highly privileged administrator IDs were supposed to be active and when they were supposed to be absent from certain servers or network segments.
So they couldn't easily tell if an admin account was being used legitimately or not?
Not with absolute certainty based on presence. A digital ID system changes that. If an attacker tries to use stolen admin credentials to access a critical server, but the actual administrator's physical digital ID isn't connected to the authorized gateway for that server.
Access denied.
Access denied.
Right.
It would halt that lateral movement dead in its tracks because the required physical token, the proof of legitimate presence, is missing at that specific point of interaction.
Okay, this is shifting my perspective significantly. We're moving from trying to mitigate attacks after they start to actually preventing them before they can even get a foothold. This sounds like pre-authentication, verifying identity before the risky interaction begins.
That's a great way to put it. Traditional security is largely post-authentication. It lets the interaction start, receives the data, then tries to figure out if it's legitimate. Digital ID with direct interaction enables true pre-authentication. The verification of the physical ID happens first as the gatekeeper.
So if we make this shift, moving from mitigation to prevention, what does that mean for all the security tools and complex protocols that companies have spent, well, billions on over the last couple of decades?
It means many of them become obsolete.
Obsolete, really? Like which ones? Give us the list. What gets thrown out?
Okay, well, think about it. If access requires a physically present, verified digital ID connecting directly, then phishing filters and all those mandatory employee training sessions on spotting phishing emails.
Gone. Why?
Because there's no public-facing login page anymore for the attacker to mimic. There's nothing to phish if access requires the physical token at a private gateway.
Okay, wow. What else?
IP whitelisting, restricting access based on location, Less critical, possibly irrelevant, because access is tied to the physical ID, not just the network address.
Right.
Complex password policies, forcing users to create insane passwords they can't remember. Gone. Password managers. Probably unnecessary for this access. Why?
Because there are no passwords used for this authentication.
Exactly. And crucially, all those layered second-factor authentication systems, 2FA via SMS, email codes, authenticator apps that just display a code you type in.
The ones we just established are often just disguised SFA.
Right. They become completely redundant because the digital ID is the true second factor. It's
Yeah.
something you have verified directly. You don't need these weaker indirect methods anymore. Even complex layered authentication workflows designed solely to patch the holes in indirect SFA.
Yeah.
They just aren't needed.
That's a pretty radical simplification. It sounds almost too good to be true, though. Implementing something this fundamental across a big organization, surely that's a massive disruptive project.
You'd think so, but according to our sources, the technical implementation is surprisingly focused and relatively straightforward. It's not about ripping out your entire network.
Okay, convince me. What are the steps?
It boils down to three main stages. Step one, you acquire a new private URL, or more accurately, you set up a dedicated private verification gateway server. This isn't a public website address anyone can browse to.
It's the specific digital door only the ID can talk to.
Exactly. It's the private interface for the digital ID. Step two, you update your user database. This is probably the main technical lift, but it's manageable. You just need to add a field to store the unique public key associated with each employee's issued digital ID.
So the gateway can verify the specific token.
Correct. That public key allows the gateway to cryptographically verify the authenticity of the physical ID token when it connects. And then the final critical step.
Let me guess. Turn off the old way.
Precisely. You remove the public login,
Yeah.
access the username password fields on your public-facing website or application portal. You close the door that relies on indirect interaction.
And can you run both side by side during a transition?
Absolutely. The sources indicate the systems can operate concurrently, allowing for a phased rollout, which significantly minimizes disruption and risk. You're essentially just changing the front door lock, not rebuilding the entire house structure.
Okay, the technology seems sound, the implementation path seems clearer than expected, and the need. Well, those cybercrime figures speak for themselves, so the biggest hurdle isn't technical, it's cultural. A willingness to change.
I think it absolutely is. It's fundamentally a battle for integrity, as you said earlier. The security industry and the organizations buying security solutions need to move past products that offer merely the illusion of security, like that mislabeled MFA we discussed.
The checkbox security mentality.
Exactly. We need a cultural shift towards demanding verified binary security, one that prioritizes actual prevention at the point of interaction, not just complex, expensive mitigation strategies after the fact.
This has been incredibly clarifying. It really drives home that true network security isn't necessarily about adding more complexity, more layers upon layers.
Sometimes it's about simplifying, getting back to first principles.
Right. It's about binary logic, simplicity, and actually securing that fundamental point of interaction, and looking at those potential costs of not doing this. The cost of delay seems far, far higher than the cost of making the switch.
It really does. To leave you with a final thought, it makes me think of something Stephen Hawking once said. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge.
Powerful.
So the question for all of us is, if our critical digital infrastructure continues to rely on systems fundamentally designed for open public interaction, systems that create that illusion of security, can we ever genuinely trust them to protect our most sensitive private data? Or is that conflict between public access models and private data security simply inescapable, unless we fundamentally change how we verify identity at the source?
That is definitely something to mull over, particularly as you think about your own digital interactions and the trust you place in them. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.